Hi, my name is Angela, and today I want to show you how to install Aras Innovator. Aras Innovator is a product lifecycle management software provided by the Aras Corporation, and I have already opened their homepage. And here you can find under the download section their latest open release that you can actually use for free. In this video I want to show you how to install this free version, and will also share some useful tips. Of course, you might say, well, it's probably just an installer, how hard can it be? But when you already take a look at the documentation where you can find their installation guide, somewhere, here it is, I've already downloaded it, you will see that Aras Innovator requires a couple of additional server-related preparation before you can actually start to install. For example, you have to set up your server, you have to activate IIS in Windows, you need a database server. So there's a couple of things that you have to do before you actually start the installation process. So you can see at the installation guide what is required, but let's make things easy. There are already a couple of resources online that are very helpful and give you a good overview of what to consider. At first we have Aras official YouTube channel, where I have a couple of videos that will guide you through the installation process. I think in this YouTube video list they still use Innovator 11, the latest version. Oh, I don't want to sign in. So I recommend these videos, and what I also can recommend is this installation guide provided by Aras partner Razorleaf. You see, it's pretty up to date, and it's really an excellent guide. Even I use this guide because it really covers everything you need and focus on the important stuff. For example, they describe here how to activate IIS at your server or your local Windows. In my video, I will install Aras Innovator at my Windows 10 private PC, so I don't have a real server. But for testing purposes, using a regular PC just works fine. So they show you here what you have to activate and how to get IIS, so please follow this guide, then you will be fine. In my video, I want to focus on the actual installer that you can download here, the install package. Well, of course, it's just a regular installer. You can just click it through, but there are a couple of small little details that that is sometimes not very well covered in the documentation, and I want to give you some additional explanation about what is actually happening in the installer. Okay, what have I done so far? I have downloaded the Aras Innovator zip package, which I have here. And here I have the unzipped version, so you can see it contains the installer. And before the actual installation of Aras Innovator, I have installed Microsoft Windows SQL Server. And in my case, I use the Express version 2019, so I have installed this one. In addition, I have installed Microsoft Server Management Studio. This is this application. And I have configured my SQL server, so I am ready to add new databases. So this is my current view here. According to the official installation guide, we also have to download .NET Framework 4.7.2 and ASP.NET Core Hosting Bundle 2.1.8. These two are required. You can see here I have already downloaded them, but I have not installed them yet because of a pretty simple reason. In my video, I also want to show you, I want to cover as many bugs, I would say, as possible. So I do some things intentionally wrong to enforce error. So my goal is to get the complete HTTP error palette, all error codes that can appear. There are a couple, and so in my video I also want to do some troubleshooting And so I sometimes do things intentionally wrong. So just listen closely, then you will be fine. And as said before, the razor leaf guide is really a big help for setting up your machine properly. Okay, then let's take a look at the installation package. It contains just the installer. For additional documentation, you can take a look at this section. And in my case, this Innovator version I have downloaded is Innovator 12 Service Pack 9. And as I said, it's the open release. There is, of course, also a subscriber version of it. But the installer used for open release and for subscribers is actually the same. What is the difference? Well, subscribers get more material. They get a couple of additional features and additional documentation. So there are a couple of additional things that are you just get when you have an Aras subscription. Okay, then let's start the installer. Where it is, it opened up in a second window. And again in my second window. Okay, welcome. Yes. Licensing. I have already read through this license. I recommend you to read through it too. And if you're fine with the condition, then accept it and move on. Here we have to answer a couple of questions. Do I have access to IIS server as administrator? Yes, I have, because I have activated IIS server in Windows and I'm the admin at this PC, so I have the rights. Then he asked, do I have installed SQL Server? Yes, I have. It was these two files. And here with the license key question, I lie a little bit because I haven't requested a license key yet. You can easily request it here by clicking this button that will open an additional homepage where you can request a license key. But it's no problem to add the license key later. Sometimes I have seen that people in the forum complain that they are not able to get a license key. And this most of the time has a simple reason, because these people are from countries known for spamming. So it often affects people from Asia or Eastern Europe. So if you have trouble to get a license key and you come from one of these countries known for spamming, then you better use a VPN and fake your location, and then you should be able to get the license key. So normally it really works excellent. You get the license key within seconds. If you have trouble, just use a VPN and you will be fine. In the next step, we can specify where to install our Innovator application. You can use the default path that is recommended here. But when you do a lot of test installations, I would recommend to change the path name to a variant that reflects the versions that you install. For example, you have a test server and you want to test various versions. It's possible to install different Innovator versions in parallel. So for example, in the past you may have tested an Innovator 15, and then you move on and test out an Innovator 7, and then you test out an Innovator 9. Then you can see when you use folder names that contain the version number, it's much easier for you as administrator to have an overview of your installed Innovator versions. In my case, I just want to use Innovator 12, but if I later may install a different service pack versions, then I might include the version number. But this one is my first installation here, so I will use Innovator 12, and it's just a name. So next step, here we can choose if we want to do a complete installation or a custom installation. And here we can specify what we actually want to install. Of course, I want to install Innovator Server, which is the actual Innovator application. Then we need a vault server for handling our files. And as this one is a complete, what I'm doing is a complete new installation, so I of course also need some databases. And we also need our OAuth server for handling registration, login process, and also security related stuff. So this is recommended by default. And you can see conversion server and agent service are crossed out. What is the purpose of these two? Conversion server is typically used for CAD conversion. So if you handle a lot of 3D models, have a CAD connector, you typically also have a conversion server. And the agent service enables Innovator to interact with other endpoints like the conversion server. So the agent service ties together the conversion server and the Innovator server. And you know, CAD conversion is a very performance consuming task. So it's pretty common to install the conversion server on a separate machine, so it doesn't conflict with the resources you may need for your regular Innovator installation. So this is why these two are crossed out, because you're supposed to install these two on a separate machine. But in my case, I will install these features anyway. I don't plan to do a lot of CAD related tasks with the conversion server, because this is my private PC. I don't do anything with CAD. But there are a couple of other Innovator features that also use the conversion server. Two features, for example, are mandatory access control, MAC, and domain access control, I think was the name, DAC. And if you want to use these two security features, you also need the conversion server and the agent service. So these tools are not just used for CAD, but also for other tasks. And as I want to do complete testing of this Innovator version, I also will install this tool. So in the next two steps, we have to configure our agent service. Here he asks me for a host name and port. We can use the default settings. This one is fine. In the next step, we have to specify our application server URL. And here is a little detail where you have to pay attention. The installer already recommends us an application server URL, and you will notice that it's called localhost Innovator server. As this installer expects that you closely follow the installation guide and will later call your Innovator instance Innovator server. So when you later want to open Innovator at your local PC, you would use the URL localhost Innovator server. This is just the name Aras use in its installation guide and also samples that they have. But when you plan to use a different URL, you should already spend some thoughts on your name at this step. So how shall we name our Innovator instance? You have to decide, are you doing a production installation or are you just doing a test installation? A production installation should always have a path that doesn't change. So for example, Innovator server would be fine, or you can just call it PLM, or you can call it My Underground. So a generic name that will not change. What is the reason for this one for a production instance? Well, simple. Your Innovator might be connected with other software in your company, and as soon as you connect something, you may use a path reference, and if your URL changes all of the time, every time you update, your end users also have to change the login data, or you have to customize your connectors. So for production, use a static name. For test instances, I personally prefer to use URLs that reflect the Innovator versions that I'm actually testing. So for example, when I have multiple Innovator instances installed in parallel and want to be able to test all of them, Then for testing, I would just use the version name of my Innovator instance. So as admin, it's easier for me to work with different instances at the same time, and I always know what I'm using right now. So in my case, as I'm just doing a test installation, I will not use Innovator Server. I will simply call it 12SP9. So just for testing. Next step, add your license key. As I have mentioned before, I don't have a license key, but it's completely fine. The installer, of course, now complains, hey, you don't have a license and you have to add it manually later. So that's what we want to do. And here we again have to specify have to pay attention for our URLs that we later want to use. Here he also recommends us to use the web alias Innovator Server. So again, change it to your URLs that you later want to use. For example, Innovator Server or PLM or My Underground, or in my case, just 12SP9. Emailing. Okay, when you have already an email SMTP server, you can add the address here. For testing purposes, I would recommend not to use an SMTP server because you might spam your end users with emails. So this setting simply just means you don't have an SMTP server. For testing purposes, it's completely fine because testing, emailing is possible without SMTP server. Your emails then just will not be sent to actual users. They just will be stored as files in a temporary folder on the server. So you can test emailing without SMTP server with no problem. And of course, edit later in the config files. Language packs. By default, Innovator is an English language. And here it now offers us the possibility to add a Japanese, German, or French language pack. There are, I think, other languages available, but this language pack you have to download from the homepage and install them manually. Well, I am German, and well, now it would be logical for me to install the German language pack. But if you are installing Aras Innovator the first time, I would strongly recommend you to not use a language pack, because, for example, with the German language pack, it's a little bit over-accurate. It really translates everything. And when you are new at Innovator and you follow the guidelines, you read the documentations, all of these documents are written in English language. The terms that are used, for example, how to create a new item type with a form and a workflow, all these terms are English. And the German language pack will override all of them. So, for example, item type will become object and form will become formular. And so suddenly everything is translated and we're completely new and want to step through the documentation. You feel completely lost because really everything is translated. So you can always add a language pack later, but I would not recommend it for testing purposes. Of course, when you want to test a language pack, then this is what you choose, of course. Some hints that I can give you. You don't have to use their complete language pack. They offer you the language pack for downloading, and it's possible that you modify it. For example, modify it in a way that only translations are contained that affects end users, while administrative items are not translated. So from my point of view, this is a good mix or a good way to use language pack, not to use the full language pack, but use the translations where they make sense. So maybe I will make a video about modifying language packs. It's not that hard, but it's nothing I want to do right now in this video. Next step, password for OAuth certificate. And here I have the next tip I want to give to you. Use a password manager. You will have to, as an admin, you will have to maintain a lot of passwords. You have passwords for testing instances, for production instances, for database, server, Innovator users, all kind of passwords. So use a password manager. And in my case, I, for example, use KeyPass. And the OAuth password, certificate password, it's not, so I have seen nothing in the documentations. I have not seen any recommendations about the length of the password, but from my personal point of view, this one is an important password. So use a password that is long enough and complex enough, because it's really, this is an important password, so don't just use 3 letters. So in my case, I use a password with 32 digits, but it's really what I use here right now. So you can decide by yourself. Then next step, configuring vault server. We are setting up a new vault, and I just will use one vault. So these settings recommendations here are fine. We have our vault name default. This is fine. Application URL is also fine. Path for the data. Yes, you can use this one. Just keep in mind your Innovator installation might change. Your vault will never change. Vault contains all your files, and this is something that has to be preserved for all Innovator versions. So the vault will always survive. So you can use the standard path, is completely fine. I will use this path in this installation. What I have often seen in other Innovator installations, that people don't use the C drive for the vault, but for example the D drive for the vault. So it's really separated from the Aras installation. But this is a matter of taste. So even in this variant, the vault is separated from the Aras installation, so it's no problem. But if you really want to really separate it, for example, then use a different drive. So I will use the C drive. Next step, conversion server. This is fine, nothing to change here. And then we come to the database configuration. We want to install, or we want to create a new database. This is the option I have selected here. I have to select my database server. It's my local SQL Express. Then I have to connect to my database server. I of course have the SA password. So I connect. In the next step, Innovator will create 2 additional users in the database. One is Innovator and the other one is Innovator Regular. Innovator is the main account. It's a powerful user account that can read, write, modify. And Innovator Regular, I think it's just used for reading. It cannot write, I think it just can read, but I'm not exactly sure. Have to check this one. And here you have to add passwords for Innovator and the Innovator Regular user accounts. So you have to specify new passwords that are used for these 2 accounts. And again, use a password manager like KeyPass. These are important passwords. These are important passwords because there is a database accounts. So again, like I have mentioned for the OAuth certificate, use a password that is long enough, secure enough, complex enough. And now I have a special tip. Don't use a password that contains any of these characters. This is a little bit, you will probably never have seen this tip before in any other documentations. Using these characters doesn't actually make problems, but they will be stored in escaped version in your configuration files. So the password will still work when you use these characters, but they will stored in this way. And this will not make trouble unless you plan to use a language pack. Because the language pack installer, it's a little tool you can download from the Aras homepage. it's a little bit outdated and it cannot handle these escaped characters. So suddenly you cannot log in and you will spend hours to find out what's happening. And guess what? Yes, it happened to me. So use a complex password, but avoid these characters. So again, we need to define a password that is complex enough for both of these accounts, and then store them in our KeyPass database. In the final step, we have to specify which database we want to install. When you take a look at my server management studio, right now I don't have any database. And let's see if this will change as soon as I install a database. The installer offers us two database templates. One is Innovator Solutions, the other one just Innovator. Well, what's the difference? The Innovator database just contains the core solution. Well, just is the wrong word. It already contains a lot of most features you will ever need. The difference to Innovator Solutions also contains the product engineering application. This application contains part management, document management, and change management. So these are the standard PLM tasks that you might want to test out when installing Innovator. And these part and change and document management are not included when you use the Innovator database. So this one is really the core product. You typically use Innovator when you want to build something very specific that might not be even a PLM task. So you can, within the Innovator database, you can use all Innovator functionality, but you really then start from the scratch. With Innovator Solutions, you already have the basic part, document management. So you normally start with this one. And then we can specify which name we want to use for our database. You, of course, can use the default name that is recommended here. When you specify your own name, keep in mind, do you want to install a production database or do you want to install a test database? For production database, again, use a name that is generic and static and doesn't change. For example, my PLM or my underground, your company's PLM, whatever, or maybe really just Innovator. So a generic name, because you will have to live with the database name for a very long time. You, of course, can change it, but, in a production environment, it will be a lot of work especially when you have connectors to other systems. So use a name that makes you comfortable for a long time. In addition, I would also avoid using spaces in the name, like here, my PLM. Spaces technically are not a problem, but sometimes in the configuration files, in the database name itself, it's stored in this version with this underscore. And then sometimes you have to pay attention. Do you have to type in this variant of the name, or do you have to use this variant of the name? This can sometimes be a little bit nasty. So if you just avoid spaces, you don't face this little issue. If you're installing your database solely for testing purposes, I would recommend to include the version number in the database name, simply for the reason when you have installed multiple databases in parallel, especially when they are from different versions, then it's much easier for you as administrator to keep an overview of your 10 databases that you might have installed. And this is what I do right now here. I just call my database Innovator 12 SP9, because this is the version I'm using. And when I click the Configure Database button, then it will install me a new database. Okay, installation of the first database is finished, and I also want to install just the core Innovator database. And again, I will not use the recommended name. Come on, I want to select it. Here. I don't want to use the default name. I again want to use my own name for testing purposes, and here we call it just Innovator 12 SP9 core because it's the core application. So let's install the second database. You can never have enough databases. Okay, in SQL Server Management Studio, you can now see that I have both databases installed. So this step is finished and we can continue. And now we are ready to begin the actual installation of Aras Innovator. Let's do it. Now our installation is completed. And let's see if we were successful. And let's open our Innovator. We can first check if our localhost page appears. It should be this generic IIS page. That's fine when you see this one. And I have specified 12SP9 as my URL. And we have our first bug.